Hi everyone. This is us again, and today we have Dr. Sophia Tetteh with us, and we're going to have an interview. So it's not going to be too formalized. It's going to be very, very relaxed, and we're going to answer a question relating to her progression, leading to her successfully achieving her PhD. So once again, congrats, Dr. Sophia Tetteh, and also use this as an opportunity to also, showcase Afro excellence. So, good morning, Dr. Tetteh.
Good morning, and thanks for the kind introduction.
All right, no worries. So let's start, with your background. So, how did it all start?
Okay.
In terms of you going into, STEM education and going into engineering and progressing into the field of design.
Okay. So I'm originally from Ghana. So how did my whole career start? So in primary school, middle school, I was doing all subjects. So I think it was maybe 10 different subjects. And then once you start to get into secondary school, which is slightly different from the UK, you do a core subjects and you do elective subjects. So for my elective subject, I chose all the sciences, which was chemistry, physics, biology, and further maths. And then I had 4 other core subjects like English, social studies that I had to do. For most people in Ghana, they would also, if you were going into the arts or vocational subjects, you had a series of subjects that you would pick as well. So I chose science. I think it has more to do with my environment. So both my parents come from STEM backgrounds. So my mom is a biologist and my dad is a structural engineer. So that was the only thing I think I was really exposed to when I was young. I was used to going into labs and seeing my mom work, or going on a site to see a structural design that my dad had put up. It also was, I think the other thing during that era in which I was growing up was that having African parents, sometimes they do that, when you grow up, you need to be an engineer, you need to be a lawyer, you need to be this. Yeah. So I really was not exposed to the arts. I wasn't really exposed to the arts. And it wasn't also something that in those environments you were encouraged or pushed into. Mm-hmm. So naturally, I progressed into STEM, into those sciences. And then when it came time for me to make that decision into tertiary education, I think every month or every few months, there was a new STEM career I wanted to do. So I wanted to be an architect at one point. I wanted to be a clinician. I was all over the place. But when it came for me to make that decision, I eventually settled with engineering. So with engineering, what I had to do was I applied to universities back in Ghana and also applied to universities in the US. But with the US, I had to do some external exams aside from what was offered in the country. So I had to do SATs, which was usually made up of maths and English. Mm-hmm. However, from my parents' perspective, if you really want to go, they said to me, if you really want to go to school in the US, make sure you're going to get a scholarship because we can't afford it. So because of that, I decided to do the subject-based SATs. So I think I did physics, maths, and biology in addition. So this was me studying those extra subjects in addition to what I needed to do in school. So I did those, I applied, and it was more or less like a waiting game to see what would happen. So I got into a school. I had initially applied to get into chemical engineering. When I got to the US, the first week, they'd usually do something called orientation, which is very similar to induction, what we would call induction in the UK. So during that period, they put all first-year engineering students together. And that was when the first time I heard of biomedical engineering. And I was so intrigued that in that 1 week, I said I wanted to change my major because we hadn't even started classes. So I was sent off to go and speak to the dean. We had like an hour talk. And she gave me an assignment. She was like, Sophia, I want you to go and do a research and come back to me in a week and we'll have a talk. So I think I spent the whole of the induction week reading everything about biomedical engineering. And I went back to Dr. Honorel. We had the meeting and she's like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, let's do this. So that is how I got into biomedical engineering. And then even within that field, it's quite broad. So even with biomedical engineering, I did it, finished, did a series of internships whilst I was in the program. And I specialized in mechanics, biomechanics to be specific. So when I started, then I decided I wanted to do a master's, just so that I could get my skill base to what I wanted. And then I was also looking into some careers that I wanted to get into. So once I graduated, I went straight into a master's program. In the US, it's 2 years. And this time around, I went into mechanical engineering, but I specialized in biomechanics. So I did that. And also during that process, I did internships as well. So that was what happened with in terms of education. And then I went from once I finished my master's, I went to work for a period of I think 4.5 years, almost 5 years, before I decided to come and do a PhD in design. So that has been my educational journey.
No, that's quite intriguing. Right, thanks for sharing that with us. Do you mind, Ali, for the purpose of the audience, what is biomedical engineering? What does it entail generally?
Okay, so biomedical engineering basically uses engineering principles to solve biological problems. So a typical example would be, so let me just focus on what biomechanics is even all about, or a portion of biomechanics, because that is even broad. So some of the things I got myself involved in was in spine mechanics. And for most people, it sounds quite strange, but you realize that the older population would always talk about back pain. They're having back pain. But when you start to look at the root of the back pain, which now we have to do a little bit of biology, you look at in between the vertebra bone has the series of discs. And as you grow, that disc starts to wear away. So where a biomedical engineer comes in is now to create something that replaces the disc. And in my experience, I've done 2 projects where you can use a polymer. A polymer is basically an artificial material that will have very similar properties to the biological material. And if you didn't want to go through that route, the other way is actually to make something a mechanical device. So using some type of a metal that would still behave, will still allow you to do the same movements that you could do with your original spine in place. So that is one area of biomedical engineering. So just using those engineering principles to solve biological problems.
Okay. All right, nicely said. Thank you for that. So this brings us to your PhD journey, because you went to Loughborough and you decided to pursue a PhD with the design school. So what interested you to pursue a PhD with Loughborough, but particularly with the Loughborough Design School?
So why did I, let me start with the first one. Why the PhD? So to be very honest with you, I was never one of those students or people that I wanted to do a PhD. I thought once I was done with my master's, I was out of school and it was basically freedom for me. Mm-hmm. But when I finished my master's, I ended up lecturing at the University of Ghana. I was lecturing with their biomedical engineering department. And during that process, I think just being in that environment with other lectures, I started to understand what a PhD was about, because it was one of the things that was brought up, what they did. So I think that gave me a good understanding of what a PhD was, that it was basically doing research in a really small area. So being in that environment for 4 years, I was like, oh, I actually wanted to do this PhD. So then I started putting applications across everywhere, basically. I was quite familiar with the US, so naturally I should have gone, that was where my roots should have gone to. But working in Ghana, one of the things that I picked up was that Ghana follows very closely to the British system. So for me, one of the things that encouraged me to apply for a PhD here was if I was in the UK system, then it makes it easier if I should go back to Ghana, what that looks like. So I started to put in applications. I wanted to work in prosthetics. So what I was doing was just looking at different schools, different researchers across a number of universities. And Professor Bibb's profile came up, which was on the design school website. And we started to have a dialogue about a PhD. So I was sending him emails. And then eventually what happened was I had to write a proposal. And when he okayed that, he was like, put in the application. So I put in the application and he said he didn't have funding. So I said to him, I'd seen a number of funding opportunities, but I would still need his support on those applications. And he said, let's go for it. So we put in those funding applications, putting the application also to the school, and we were successful with both of them, and that was my journey into the PhD.
Okay, all right, cool. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your journey. So, what particular area of research did you undertake to support your PhD?
So I worked on prosthetics, specifically with facial prosthetics. So what I did with my PhD was I was looking at materials that could be used for the fabrication of prostheses, specifically for resource less developed areas, resource limited areas. That was what my PhD was about. And in the process of doing that, one of the things I looked at was the antimicrobial nature of how these different materials would respond, because it's been found out that one of the most dominant material that is currently used is silicone. However, it tends to degrade. So looking at antimicrobials that would prevent or slow the degradation process of the materials. And then the other bit that I did was also looking at for the different materials that I came up with, that one we could easily get access to in these areas. Also looked at the mechanics of that material. So how it will degrade. So looking at tension, looking at the color, also looking at pigmentation. So the color and how that also degrades over a time period. And I was doing that so that I could also say that for every 3 months or every 6 months, patients would have to replace or go get a new material.
Oh, that's very interesting. So, what do you have to do for each year of your studies? So, what did you have to get sorted in the first year, second year, and in the final year of your studies?
Is this in relation to a PhD?
Yes.
Or just in general? Okay, so first year of PhD, there's a lot of things that you need to do. So the first part is actually narrowing down your project that you want to do, because sometimes you have the idea, but the idea is very, very broad. So a lot of literature review to find out what has already been done in that field. And whilst you're doing the literature review, you're going to find out what else needs to be done, because most journal articles, I think the last paragraph would usually tell you what else needs to be done, or what else could have been done to improve upon work that's already in existence. And then once you will come up, depending on, you read a lot of articles, actually maybe a little bit too much. Once you know that, then you can start to pick that up, look at the resources your university or school has, and then also look at funding that you have. So when I say funding, for maybe you want to do a project, but your school does not have the facility, which means you may need external to do that bit of your work externally. That might mean that, okay, maybe that might not work because that funding is not there, or maybe even what you want to do is not available in the UK. So you would have to get that bit done. The other thing is also going for trainings, which in Loughborough, the doctoral college provides for us. They even have prescribed which trainings you should take in your first, second, and third years. And some of it will boil on time management, because at this point, it's very different from masters, very different from undergrad. So sometimes you feel like you have lots of time, but you really don't. You really don't have that time. And then you have to learning to pace yourself. But I think one very important thing that I think every PhD student needs to have is that you need to be self-motivated. And you also need to take charge of your work. You will have supervisors, but their role is mostly to guide you and make sure that you don't go off course, but they will not do the work for you, which is, I think, one of the things that most PhD students struggle with. You are totally in control of your work, but your supervisors will guide you along the way. But self-motivation is very, very key. And in as much as you need that self-motivation, you're also going to have moments where you really don't want to do anything. And then you are going to have some weeks where you are self-motivated 24/7 throughout that week. So it's almost like a cycle.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's very, very good advice. So any of our audience listeners take that on board, particularly anyone that wants to pursue a PhD, because I think there's a lot of people have that notion of, I'm just in it for the title, just to be called doctor, but they tend not to think about what it takes and that intrinsic characteristic by having that motivation in pursuing that topic for over 3, 4, 5 years, depending on what mode of studies you decide to choose. Right. So cheers for that. So in a nutshell, what did you end up achieving to successfully graduate? So we're still talking about PhD.
So one is finishing up. So let me focus actually on Loughborough. For Loughborough, at the end of every academic year of your PhD, depending on when you start, you need to do a yearly review. And your yearly review is not with your supervisor. So it's someone still within your department, but then they have an independent eye into your work to give you feedback. And if they feel you're not making the progress or you're not doing what you said you wanted to do, then they're the ones that will hold the brakes. Okay. So you do that through your first 3 years. And depending on whether your PhD is 3 years or 4 years, but you will have those yearly reviews. And during the process of the PhD, you'll also have the opportunity to attend conferences. Conferences are good because you get to meet other people in your field. You get to learn new technologies or new ways in which people are doing the same thing in your research area. You also get the opportunity to put in like a conference paper, present your work, and get feedback from other people who are not your supervisor or who are internally assessing your work. Once that all is done, personally for me, from year one, I started writing up because before I got into the PhD program, I know people that I was told of people that had sort of I don't want to even use the word quit, but did not finish their PhD mostly because of that writing up stage. So I started writing down or having a frame for writing up from year one. That's what I was doing. So at the end of it all, if your supervisor says, and then the internal advisor says that they agree that you've done everything that you said you would achieve, then you start to write your thesis up. And once the thesis is written up, the other process that happens with that is that now your thesis is sent out to an external examiner. So the external examiner could take anywhere from, I think, 4 weeks to 3 months. They read through your thesis. They will they'll have comments, questions about your work, and then you are given the opportunity to have a viva, where yourself, the external examiner, and then someone within your university is also in that meeting to discuss your work. That meeting could range from, I think, anywhere from slightly over an hour to almost a whole day. And then the outcome of that PhD, I think most schools have very different things. So it's either a pass with corrections, fail, or sometimes they will actually downgrade it to a Master of Philosophy. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, that's what it's called. So in that is what I basically had to do. So I had the opportunity to do conferences. Through my PhD, I had the opportunity to also go do how do I call this? I have the opportunity to work. So I got, how do I call this? So you do conferences, which I had the opportunity to do. I also had the opportunity to I can't remember the name of it.
Is it like is it similar to like the PhD version of a placement or something? Like a fellowship?
It wasn't a direct, it's like going to spend a week somewhere for training. I don't know how you call that.
Yeah, just call it, training.
Training, okay.
Yeah, external training. So yeah, that should do it.
Okay, let me just repeat myself. I also had the opportunity of going to do training externally outside of my school, university, which was fully funded. And with that, you get to actually meet people. And because of meeting other people, you also get the hands-on experience.
Yeah.
Learning from different people. So that was also interesting. And then I think
similar to like an exchange program or something.
Yeah, an exchange program. And then you also get the opportunity to publish the work that you're doing. So I was also able to do that as well, whether through conferences, articles, or in journals.
Okay. So those ones, were they paid on behalf of the university, or were they kind of free publications?
So for publications, so also it depends on the journal you choose. So for some journals, depending on the research area, they will not charge you. So I think my first paper that I didn't have to pay anything. However, it's not free access.
Okay.
So that would probably be the cash. The second one was paid, but it was paid through funding that I had.
Okay.
It was paid through funding that I had. And then the other thing I noticed, if you are working on a project that has collaborators, sometimes depending on where they are, location-wise, you won't have to pay publication fee. So that all comes into play.
Okay. So I think with something like that, there'll always be some form of principal investigator. So they will probably have to kind of sort out the bill if you're in that context.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's cool. So life after your PhD. So you graduate successfully. What was the next stage? Did you decide to go into industry? Did you decide to do your own project, or did you go back to academia?
So life of a PhD. So I think my last year I was thinking of, okay, what next do I do once the PhD is over? And I think this is a question that for most PhD students, I think when you're doing the PhD, you're really not thinking too much about it. But then at that point in year 3, something that is at the back of every PhD student's mind. So I decided that I was going to look at all my options. So what was in industry, academia, I was looking at both of them, or even teaching. I settled with going back into teaching. So I am currently working as a PhD teacher with the Brilliant Club, Researchers in Schools. And what I have to do in my role is one, so what they do in the program is they place you into disadvantaged, low socio-economic areas within the UK. Okay. And their goal is one, for you to encourage students within these areas to pursue higher education. And then the second thing I'm doing now is I'm teaching them physics, with the hopes of getting them to get into physics-based careers. But I'm quite biased, so it's going to be in engineering.
Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, okay. That's nice. So you really planted within the STEM industry, so which is very good. Because one of the things I've noticed is that, particularly when it comes to product design, you don't really see a lot of kids, from African and Caribbean backgrounds. And I think one of the reasons I want to, kickstart this project is to, particularly, diaspora and blacks, is to, for them to see other outlets other than what they see on the TV. So when they watch TV, all they see in terms of successful black people are either people in the music industry or in the acting industry or in the sports industry. You really see, any person of professional, caliber. So I was kind of like there thinking about my kids in general. So other than, myself and, their mother and, close relatives, what else do they see?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of the reason why, I'm creating this platform so that people get to see you. So, whether the, boys of African and Caribbean descent or whether the girls from African, at least you can see that, okay, there are other opportunities. So, so that's quite interesting. Now, I was looking at your LinkedIn. Oh, sorry.
I think what you said is very, very true. What I don't know is that I feel like society has pushed certain careers out, and that is what the younger generation sees. And then things like product design, engineering, people don't even know what it is. And if they do know, what they know about it is quite wrong.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is that most people also don't know the different career or by doing what different subjects, what that can lead you to do. Yeah. So I think that is a problem with, I don't know whether it's our society, or the people in the field need to actually push to be doing that pushing and promoting. That is why I personally don't know. Because there's definitely a gap that needs to be filled in that.
Yeah, because again, it's a very strong economic driver. For us in the UK, I think a paper that I'm yet to send off. Apparently, it contributes to between £3 to £5 billion annually from that particular industry, and we're not even talking about including manufacturing. It's just generating ideas and pushing new innovation and different way of doing things. So it's something that has good potential, especially with this new advent of internalized trading on the continent. I think something like that will really come in quite handy, and also to kind of reduce the dependence on the outside world, particularly the Western world, and for African economies to more or less be in that position to be able to understand and convert their own materials to drive their own economy. So I think it's an area that really needs looking into, because I think, for instance, I can't speak for any other country other than Ghana. I think everything seems to be constrained to how things were done in the colonial days, and there hasn't really been any critical advancements, particularly reflection of what are the needs of the economy as a whole. So I think, at least creating that awareness will really help. So yeah. All right. So thanks, Sophie. So as I was saying, I looked on your LinkedIn profile, and I don't whether it was either LinkedIn or I accidentally, was browsing through Instagram, and there's a project that you actually pursuing, something related to STEM. I've forgotten what the full name is. Do you want to, hint a little bit about that?
Is it Engineering Conversations?
I don't really know, because it started off with STEM, and I think STEM Inspires, I believe. It's called
STEM Inspires, okay.
STEM Inspires, yes, that's the one.
Okay, so how did STEM Inspires start? So, that's a long story, but I'll keep it short. Okay. So how did I start STEM Inspires? So some Yes, far away. I was on social media. To be very specific, on Facebook. However, I got off all social media platforms except for LinkedIn because I said to myself, this was taking too much of my time. However, when I started my PhD with Loughborough, I think the first 6 months, I realized that I would always find out things when activities or opportunities were past and gone. So I said, no, something has to change here. So that for me meant that I needed to come back on social media because I realized that was where almost everything was happening. If I needed to know what was happening there and now. So what I did was I came back. I still refused to come on Facebook. But I came back I joined Twitter and then I joined Instagram. Those were my two main platforms. When I joined them, it was, for me initially, it was to find out what was going on in Loughborough, in terms of the university, what was happening. So I joined those two places. However, for my Instagram, what I was started to do with my Instagram was start recording my PhD experiences. So if I was in a lab and I was working, sometimes I'll do a 5-minute video, 2-minute video, and I'll put it on there. So that was because Instagram just curates pictures. And so that's what I did with Instagram. And then on Twitter, obviously, as I following, it also gave me the opportunity to follow other people that were doing similar research to what I was doing or similar interest areas. So Twitter for me was quite a good platform because that was where I found the training, the external training that I got on. So that training ended up getting me into South Africa for a whole week paid, and I got to do that training. I also got invited to, I think, 2 conferences through there, just because of the people I was interacting with. So it was really good. And then I also got grant funding through Loughborough. It was just advertised. I don't know whether it was advertised via email and I missed it because you tend to get too many emails. But when I saw it on Twitter, it came on my feed, I applied, and I got the money. So that funded a good chunk of my lab work for my PhD. So I didn't have to pay anything. And then for one of my journal articles, they also paid for it. So for me, that was how I started coming on to Twitter, those advantages. So I said, okay, initially my initial thoughts were that I was wasting time. But then what I have come to realize is that you can actually use the same platforms to your advantage. So if you're looking for something, you want to know something, you can still use those platforms. So I did that. And then I think for Instagram, mostly I was tracking almost everything I was doing in my PhD. And then my friends were like, oh, Sophia, if you're doing all of this, why don't you put it on YouTube? So I put the same information on YouTube where probably I'll do like, okay, I'm going to a conference and be talking through what is happening in the conference, just so people have an idea. Or if I have a sequence day, like a day in a PhD, a day in the life of a PhD student. So I was doing that for a while, put it on YouTube. But YouTube, I used to privatize it now. And I think I have everything open, which is, it's a bit weird now for me, but I had to do that. And I put it out. I was like, okay, this is because my friends were enjoying it. I'm like, okay, this is a bit weird, but this is my life currently. So if you call me and you're not getting me, maybe I'm stuck in the lab and I can't even hear my phone going off. So I did that. And then once PhD ended, it was a bit weird because most of the things I was doing on all of these platforms related to my PhD. Now PhD, so like my head, I'm like, what do you do now? So right now for Twitter, what I really push on Twitter is anything STEM that is going on, mostly UK, but also worldwide. I would promote that or push that out. And then for Instagram, I got stuck on Instagram because I'm like, what do I do now? However, when the pandemic hit last year, I made this video. I think it was for around June, the International Women's Day in Engineering. So around, I think, June 23rd. So we're all stuck home. And I said, okay, if we're all stuck home, I had a little bit of time on my hand. And I said, you know what, let's actually celebrate this day properly. We actually have a little bit more time. So what I did was I got some of my friends and I said, I need you to share your engineering experiences with me. 20-minute quick video, and then I'll post it out. So I made this one, I think about a 2-minute video, and I put it on Twitter. And people started viewing and they're like, oh, we can't wait to see it. So the engineering week comes up, and I got my friends. It was a struggle initially to get them. And every day I was putting out a video on the same video I put on YouTube, I put it on Instagram. When I started doing that, I started getting comments, oh, really like this. We didn't know this was what engineering was about. Can you keep going? So I did it for the 7 days, stopped and took a break, and I started getting messages. When is the next video coming out? So I was like, huh? What do you mean next video coming out? So I said, okay, I can do this, but I definitely can't do it seven days a week because I have a job to do. This is something I'm doing on the side. So I was like, okay, fine. I can do this, but I'll do it just one video a week because I need to edit, clean it up. So then from STEM Inspires, I bettered out engineering conversations where we talk about the different fields in engineering, how my guest got into those fields, and the experiences so far. So I don't limit it to experience, but I limit it to everybody, from someone who is just starting the engineering career to the last person I spoke to has been in aerospace engineering for 22 years. So they all have a wide range of experiences that I think people who are considering that field would be quite interested to get into. So that is how STEM Inspires came about and has been evolving, basically. Yeah.
All right. So sounds very interesting. But is the focus just towards women, or is it gender neutral?
So because this I heard from the International Women's Day in Engineering last year, the bulk of the work so far around it has been in women. But I do have plans this year to start getting everybody on board there, because we can definitely learn from each other. But then with the women on there, because one of the other things is that for the UK in particular, there are only, I think the amount of women in the engineering career is less than 9%.
Yeah.
So we are losing a lot. It's almost like a leaky pipe where people from secondary into university, we don't know where they're going. So so far the bulk of it has been there, but this year we're going to see some new material come up there.
Okay. All right. Cheers for sharing that. Okay. So let's talk about your key achievements, so things that you are quite proud of in terms of achieving throughout your progression. Do you want to give us a little bit of insight in that? So what are some of the key accomplishments? What are some of the things? So it doesn't necessarily need to be, something grandiose. It could be, something very minor, something a bit more personal, something more academic focus or industrial focus. So it's up to you if you want to share with us.
Let's see. So, personal achievements. I think achievements. So in answering this question, I think one of the things people need to realize is that what person A will call achievement will be different from person B, and it's going to vary for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, so far in my career, when I was doing all the things that I needed to do, I wasn't thinking that this is the reward that I want out of it. I was looking more at how my work would impact the people that needed it. And for me, it also gave me fulfillment. So if I was able to have that sense of fulfillment, I was very happy. So one of the I think one thing that I wasn't expecting along my career that happened, I had worked with this final company back in the US. I think I had left them over 2 years, and I had moved on. And I remember my manager there sent me an email and asked me where I was or what I was doing. And I thought that email was sort of weird. I was like, what's going on? And then he said to me some work that I had done with them whilst I was there, they wanted to put that into a pattern. And I was like, huh? I was so confused. So I was like, what are you talking about? So apparently they had put the whole document together, and it was more or less waiting for me to say I'm okay for the work that I contributed to go into the pattern. So they sent me a big dossier from their lawyers, and they're like, can you read and sign off? And I was surprised because this was something I'd done 2 years ago and moved on. I didn't really think about it, which for me tells me if you put in the work, people will appreciate it. So I do have a pattern, and I was very happy about it because it was more of design work, which in my head during that time, I didn't even think about it in terms that I was doing design work. I was just in my head, it was just, oh, you're doing your engineering. So it came full circle when I ended up at the design school. You're in the design school now doing a PhD. So that's one of the things that really made me really good achievement for me. And then I was applying for Chartership with the Institute of Engineers in Ghana. So it's quite they have requirements that you need to satisfy for that process. So I went through all of it. I was quite confident I'll be able to get through all of it. And I did. So they usually have a ceremony in which they give you the diploma or the certificate for it. So we went for the ceremony. I thought I was just going to get and then I was out of the door. I went for that ceremony, and they had categories that day for each of those engineering, for each of those, so electrical, mechanical, civil. They chose a best candidate for that year group, and they chose. I got chosen, and when they called my name, I was just sitting there because I was so confused. I was like, "What is happening here?" I was just sitting there because I was so confused. Like, what is going on? So they chose. I got chosen for the best candidate for mechanical and agri engineering because they said, one of the things that they said was what they typically see people do in mechanical engineering and agri engineering has always been the same things over. But when they looked at the work I had done, I think because I had done biomechanics, I did some work in electronic recycling at some point. They had never seen anybody with the sort of profile and work I had done before. So that was also a surprise to me. So at the end of the day, for me, it's more of putting the work. As long as you yourself are fulfilled and you know the impact your work. For me, I also look at the impact of the work that I'm doing. Those achievements will come either sooner or later. Yeah.
Yeah, wisely said. All right, cheers for that. Now we're going to a bit of dark territory. We're getting close to the finishing line. How about your challenges? During your experiences, particularly studying in the USA, studying in the UK. This, if you're looking at it from you being a woman and also being of African descent.
The first thing I'll say is that there are challenges everywhere. And being aware of it, or being aware that it's going to happen, also helps. I think one of the things that helped me along my journey, I went to, so in secondary school, I went to an all-girls school, and we were really encouraged and pushed that whatever you wanted to do, go for it. So when I was going through university, throughout my I wasn't like phased out when I ended up in a class with all boys in some of my lessons. I was just me. However, you would realize that let's say, when you go into practicals or labs, the boys were always fighting to maybe put the circuit together. And sometimes you were just left behind. Sometimes you would notice those things happening. But one of the things that one of my lecturers said to me, Dr. Lau, he always goes especially if you're in a work environment, everything that you're doing, make sure you're keeping a record of what you're doing. And then also ask questions. Ask questions if you are lost. Don't let your environment put you in silence, because then you cannot do the work that you need to do. So that helped me, because I think when for almost all the places that I've worked, when I've struggled or I didn't know what I needed to do, I would go and seek for that help. Sometimes some of the things that you will struggle with is probably just Google it. But if Google is not helping you at that point, walk up to somebody for a little bit more of clarity on what needed to be done. So some of the challenges that I've personally faced, I've gone into work environments where they're using a slightly different software than what I'm used to. So I think the first, they were using, because I think I'd done most of my design work on Autodesk, but they were using, I can't remember the name of the software now.
Katia?
Yeah, they were using that, and I had never used that before. I didn't even know how to start. Okay, I could open a page, but just to make sure that I was fluid and I knew what I was doing, I didn't know. So for me, it was basically going and telling them, I didn't know how to use this. Do they have any training material that I could go through quickly just to familiarize myself? Because most of these softwares are quite similar. It's just the interface might look different. So being bold enough to ask them, and for most companies, they're actually willing to help you or train you to get to where you need to be. But if you don't ask, they won't know. And if you don't do the work, they'll also just assume you are just being lazy and not working. When it comes to teaching as well, I got thrown into teaching initially through tutoring. So I think it was first year of uni. My calculus teacher called me out and said, I want you to help with tutoring in school. And I was in my head, I was like, I've just done only 1 year of maths, only 1 year of maths. So that was how my official journey into teaching was. So I did that, ended up being a teaching assistant. And then the next big teaching that I had to do was lecturing. So in that path, I'm like, okay, how do you sequence a series of lessons from week 1 to maybe week 10 for students? How do you mark effectively or give feedback effectively? But in that process of struggling, I'm just going straight to a colleague or head of department and can I see sample of work of what you would consider good feedback or good marking or what a good marking scheme should look like, what variables needed. And I was taught all of that. But initially I didn't know. And if I was just doing things just by myself, I would have failed in all of those opportunities I found myself. And then there's also going to be personal challenges, which could be anywhere from an illness to just even your mental health. And I think people should be aware of it that it's life. Life will happen, but it doesn't mean that you give up just because those challenges have popped up as well. So the challenges will come, but you work around it. You work around it. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, cheers for sharing that. And one final thing, because you've had the opportunity to, let's say, teach in Ghana, because you did say that you were a lecturer with the University of Ghana in the Ghana. And you've also had, some teaching experience in the Western world too. So you've done a bit of teaching in some of the universities in the UK. So in terms of your experience, what are, number one, the commonalities and what are the differences from your perspective?
In terms of teaching, so I think it depends on how we look at it. So when I compare teaching back in Ghana, they do have some good aspects of it. They do have things that needs to be worked on. So let me talk about the challenges. So one of the good things is that in Ghana, there are lecturers, teachers down there who are very passionate about what they do, about their subjects, and then also passing off that knowledge to their students. Because one of the challenges in a place like Ghana or in any resource limited country is that it's the same issues that we have here where students don't know what doing maybe a certain degree, the different opportunities that you have. Sometimes they are quite limited that if you do civil engineering, this is what you get into. Those opportunities where maybe you can do this, instead of looking at the skill sets that you have gained and where the numerous opportunities that skill set can give, which I think is similar here in some industries. And then the other second challenge I picked up whilst teaching in Ghana, was the lack of practicals. So during the time that I was in University of Ghana, we did have the physical space for a lab, but we don't have the equipment. I know that has changed as of today as I'm speaking. So for a lot of the lessons that you needed to do practicals, you'd have to do something more virtual, or it would end up being heavily theory. But now I think a few years ago, they did acquire some of the some equipment to do practicals. However, across the board, they might not also have the an SCM machine that you would typically find in a lab. It might not be updated technology. So that is still a challenge there. But one of the things that was happening around the time I left them was that they would do a lot of collaborative work with Western universities. So maybe start a project there, and then the bit that needed further analysis, they will let their Western collaborators take care of it. Teaching on this side of the world, one of the things I have found is that here you would actually have the labs. You have all the equipment. If your university did not have the equipment, the university next door is likely to have it. So you could actually do a lot of things in that aspect. The things that I would also say is the commonality is that we have students that don't know the full range of opportunities available to them. And I don't know whether it's the way the whole education system is, and that is why students don't know, or it's maybe the way we do careers, because that issue is also in Ghana. But personally, for me, I think one of the things I remember, undergrad, we had an undergrad dinner graduation, and one of the speakers said that in as much as you've gotten a degree in this field, you actually need to sit down, look at the skill sets that you have gained, because it's the skill sets that will get you to different places, as opposed to thinking, I'm a product designer, and the only thing I'm going to do is design products. If you do that, you're actually selling yourself short, and you will also not be challenging yourself. So I remember, I think of an undergrad sitting down. I actually do this quite often, where I sit down and I take into account the different skills that I have. Oh, I can do this, I can do that. And then by doing that as well, one of the things you realize is that, oh, I actually don't really know this. Maybe I need to work more on this area to improve. But we don't really do. I've noticed across both places, we really don't do that in education, where students know the skill sets, or even if. And then also the other thing is sometimes you tell students write a lab report, which I think across both places, they all don't like writing a lab. They all don't like writing a lab report. But when I think it's also maybe the way we say it, or the importance of it, because you get into a work environment and you'll be doing reports back and back and back. So maybe the importance of writing that report, because for some people it's like, oh, I just want to design. Like, I don't want to write anything. What am I writing this for? But if you can't document what you've done in the workplace, doesn't help. It doesn't help. So those are the things that I have noticed. But I think looking at the way the world is going and all of these pandemic issues, collaborative work is going to be key going forward, and creating those partnerships across board.
Okay. All right. Cheers for that. So we're coming towards the end of the interview, and from your experience, what are your final words of wisdom to anyone watching this, particularly the younger folk, whether male or female, who really want to pursue a career within the STEM industry, or anyone that's wishing to maybe pursue biomedical design or product design, or anything in that regard. So what would be your final words in terms of what preparation they need to make, and the reality of pursuing that particular career path?
The first thing I would say to them is go for it. If for those who are certain, they are passionate, they know the field, they've done their research, they've done their homework, and they're just having doubts, I would say go for it. For those that have heard, maybe they've heard the name product design, they've heard maybe some type of engineering or whatever it is that you want to do. You've heard the names, but you don't know what those names mean. That means you have a little bit of work to do. And what do I mean by work? First of all, just go on Google and start reading about these fields. Sometimes the things on Google can be quite abstract, and sound very boring. That is your step one. Step two, try and reach out to people that are in some of these fields. I found out that people actually will be willing to talk to you about what they do in their everyday job roles. So send someone an email. I know most of the younger youth are more tech savvy and online. So I'll say send an email. Two things, there are only two things that will happen. It's either when you send the email or correspondence, you don't get a response back, or you get one. But if you don't send it, none of it is going to happen. And then in preparing yourself for some of these fields, look at what people are doing, and then also anticipate what will happen 5 years, 10 years in some of these fields as well. Because a product designer in 2021 would look very different from a product designer in 2050, 2041. So what you're going to do in that process to make sure you are up to date with what is going on. It all sounds, but I would say definitely go for it. Talk to people. I know people say get a mentor. Getting a mentor is good if it's somebody in that field and you're really certain this is what I want to do. But the other thing you also need to know is that you're communicating or dialoguing with these people, your journey will be different from theirs. Those I think the journey for everybody is different. I don't think you'll find two people that have the same journeys to that final goal. Yours also be different. And for some people, it'll be hitting those roadblocks and thinking, oh, I need to quit. No, you don't need to quit. You don't need to quit. What I would say to you is you persevere, you're a bit more resilient. And then those roadblocks, you overcome them. And that is it. And then I think right now, and it's just looking at what do I want to do? Usually people will generally, I think for almost all career fields, there is this is what you need to do in those fields. But think outside of the box, that what do I want to do with my degree? That nobody else is telling me, because I think personally for me, I'm one of those people that I feel like I've been everywhere. Because I've done engineering, I've done teaching, I've done lecturing, I've done electronic recycling, which I think amongst all the things I did, when I was in electronic recycling is when I was most discouraged. Why are you doing it? I got everybody on my neck about it, but I enjoyed it so much because I was challenging myself and I was learning about that. I was learning about recycling. And then when I came on back on social media, I think for most people, they're just on social media because everybody's there. But for me, I think coming back a second time, I was looking at what opportunities I would get on social media, what else I could be doing. So you can be on social media. Yeah, it's fine for friends, family. But also you can also think about it in terms of your career as well. So I think that would be my advice, but definitely go for it. And if you hit those roadblocks, there are people to help you get out of it.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Tetteh, for those final words of wisdom. And hopefully we can do this another time, maybe as a Q&A, particularly focusing on, it could be maybe girls that want to, go into engineering or anything STEM related, or, anyone generally that really wants to, have a better understanding in terms of, okay, what does it entail, pursuing a master's or an undergrad or a PhD, or even within, the world of engineering, what are the opportunities in there, other than, the common ones? Are there other aspects and specialisms relating to, engineering and product design and things like that? Or even, greater context in terms of, okay, what are the labor opportunities in terms of, enhancing the Human Development Index, in terms of, okay, those type of skills that will enhance, the economies of particularly, countries that are deemed classified as third world. So yeah, so hopefully we can do this some other time. So I want to use this opportunity to thank you for dedicating, some time of your weekend to have this chat with us, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again.
Thank you for having me on. It's been good sharing my experiences as well. I think for the young people coming up, they're actually in a really good position, because I feel like when I was younger and in their age, nobody was talking or sharing their stories. So, this is actually really good for them, and to know what else to expect as they get older. So very good for putting this together.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. So on this note, we'll call it a day, and hopefully we get to do this some other time. Okay, so for everyone, thank you for watching, and hopefully I will present another speaker to give you further insight into the world of STEM. So on that note, goodbye, and stay safe.
Bye.